Welcome everyone to the FlowFest tech stream. We are really excited to show you all the nice things about Flowable. You can also join the architect stream and the business stream. There are also lots of good sessions there. But yeah, very welcome to the tech stream. And let's get started with the presentation. So this presentation is about what's new in Flowable. And we will start with looking into the architecture, look a bit ahead to the new developments that we are doing within Flowable. So it gives you a good overview of what Flowable can do for you and the different patterns on how to work with Flowable. So just as a short introduction, so I'm working as a VP of engineering at Flowable. My name is Tijs Rademakers. I'm the co-founder of Flowable, and I'm really a BPM enthusiast who loves to work with all the standards that the OMG organization has provided with BPMN, CMMN, DMN, but also just BPM in general, low code. Really love to work in that area. So we would like to make this a bit of an interactive presentation. So the idea is that there's plenty of opportunity at the end for Q&A. So if you look at your screen at the bottom, you should see a box like Ask the Speaker. And there you can create a question. We have a moderator, which is actually Joram, my good friend, who is also one of the founders of Flowable, and he will moderate the questions, and we will talk about those at the end of this session. There's also a live chat possibility on the left side next to it, if you want to engage with other participants. And just as you know, because there's a lot of content that we are presenting today on the tech stream, on the architect stream, on the business stream, that you know that every session will be recorded. So if you want to look back at a later point and look back at a certain topic, you can always do that, just that you are aware of that. So like I already told a little bit, but what we are going to do first is look at the Flowable architecture, look a bit at the principles that we use within the Flowable software. That's really the foundation where we build everything upon. Then we have some nice announcements about a new design application that we are working on. And I want to share some technical details about this new design application with everyone, and also show a bit on what we are doing there, how it's going to look like, and also why we are doing this. Then also wanted to discuss about our managed service solution, and then not from a sales point of view, but more from a tech point of view. What did we do there to provide this managed service solution? What kind of technology are we using there? And it's really to help you run Flowable in an easy way, and that we can manage that for you. So at the end, like I already mentioned, there's plenty of opportunity for Q&A. So any questions that might pop up in your mind, just let us know. So now first looking at the foundation of Flowable, looking at the principles and all of that. And that starts a bit with our tagline, which is intelligent business automation. And in intelligent means we try to help you create quite complex process models, case models. You can add a lot of complex logic to that. You can help your knowledge workers to guide them with Flowable. So that's the intelligent part. Then another important part is the low code bit. So low code is a very important aspect to Flowable. We come from an open source foundation where that was actually mainly Java APIs, REST APIs, so more from a technical kind of background. But what we have been working on a lot is our low-code capabilities. And that's really the foundation of Flowable, that we can help you in all kind of ways to model your process model, your case model in a good way, add interactivity with other services within your organization, use, for example, the event registry, which we will talk about later, to send out events, receive events from other systems, create documents with templates. And there are lots of low-code capabilities available. And yeah, we will discuss that a bit later in detail. Another really important part, and which also makes Flowable stand out a bit when you compare us with other low-code vendors, is the open aspect. And that starts with supporting the open standards, BPMN, CMMN, DMN. And that's really the foundation of our engines, of our platform, an open architecture. So a lot of possibilities to plug in your own logic. There are no boundaries there. And that's very different from a kind of black box system where it's really difficult to add your own logic to. Flowable is really designed to make it as flexible and as extensible as possible. And then there's the open source aspect. We come from an open source background. So our BPMN, CMMN, DMN engines are all available in open source on our GitHub repository. And that's really our foundation. And so you can really see how is a certain transaction run on our BPMN engine, on our CMMN engine. You can look at all the internals if you are interested in that. So open in a lot of different aspects. Then if you look at the products that we have, then we have our Flowable Work platform as our centerpiece, as our main product. So that's really supporting our low-code capabilities. It allows you to design all the models that we have available, and you can run that with our Flowable Work UI. Then we have Flowable Orchestrate, and that's more a kind of bare bones approach. So it's actually a supported version of our open source engines. So if you want to integrate Flowable within your own application as an OEM kind of setup, or you are more interested in running it in a more straight through way, in a microservice way, then Flowable Orchestrate might also be a good approach. It's lacking a bit the low-code capabilities that we have in the Flowable Work product. So that's a very big distinction between those products. Now, if you now go ahead and dive a bit into those different parts, then it really starts with this supporting the standards that I just mentioned. And just to recap a bit, if we talk about OMG, that's the standardization organization. It provides a safe haven for a lot of open standards that we have today. And a couple of those are the ones that we talk about today. So BPMN is for process modeling and execution, CMMN for case modeling and execution, and DMN for decision modeling and execution. And you can look at these standards in a distinct way. You could use CMMN separate from the other standards, so just in isolation. Same goes for BPMN, same goes for DMN. But that's actually the really strong foundation for Flowable, that we really believe in using these standards together. So it's not only that you can invoke a process from a case. So like you see here in this example, there's a process task in CMMN. And when that process task gets activated, a BPMN process is started. That's the kind of bare bones integration that we have. And the same goes for BPMN to DMN. and actually you could also use a DMN in a CMMN model. You have a decision task that you can use in your process or case model, and that will invoke a DMN decision table or even a DMN service if there's more complex logic involved. So it's really the interaction between these different standards. And we go a step further that we really think that CMMN is really great at logic that has a long living state. So I think about, for example, a customer within a company where that customer can live for like 80 is a bit long, 50 years within the boundaries of the company. So it becomes a customer like 50 years back and it continues for 50 years. Then a case is a really great way to manage that customer. And you can think about changing an address from that case or adding a spouse, a partner to that customer. But it could also be add a new bank account. So a lot of different actions could be taken from this case. And when you want to execute, for example, a change address action or adding a partner, that could very well be a process task in that case model that then executes a sequential order of steps, where BPMN is really great for. So if the sequential order is really well known, there are no kind of not a lot of manual interactions where you can say, I don't want to start a credit check, but I actually want to start another task, then BPMN is really good because it's straightforward, it's clear what needs to happen, the flow is clear, it's clearly laid out. Then BPMN is a great way to use. CMMN is more for, you have a number of options. Let's say there are 10 options that you can choose from, and the person using the case, and it can be a knowledge worker, will decide which process needs to be started at which point. And so there's more knowledge involved, there's more interaction involved, and that's where cases are really great. And then DMN comes in the picture because there's often small bits or larger bits where you want to execute a little bit of logic, or you want to calculate, for example, go in this direction if I'm coming from a European country, go in this direction if it's a US country. Those kind of paths can be easily calculated in a DMN decision table, and then you don't have to hard code it into a process or case model. So it provides a nice isolation of that kind of logic. And that's why we really believe in using the standards together and not in isolation. And we go a bit further than that. So, for example, variables that you have available within your case can also be accessed in your process model if that's what you would like. You can change a case variable from a process model. So there's a lot of interaction between the CMMN and BPMN process models to share state and make sure that everything can be modeled in a nice way. Then in addition to BPMN, CMMN, DMN, we go, of course, a lot further, because that's only about case modeling, process modeling, decision table modeling. But to be a low-code platform, you have to do a lot more, of course. And this gives an example of some of the additional model types that we provide. So, for example, there's a service registry task that you can use in a process and case model. And that's actually an abstraction of an interaction that you have with an external service. So you can implement fully there the request handling, response handling, error handling. Everything is nicely isolated then in this service registry model. And instead of implementing that within your process model, or even worse, within your case model, you nicely want to separate this kind of things in a separate model, and that also allows you to implement a lot more functionality. The same thing for data objects. So we have quite an extensive data object support, where you can nicely structure your data objects, tell what an order object, data object means within your organization, what an account means within your organization, or any other data object that you can think about. And when you think about data objects, then often the first use case would be to store that in a database, or get that from a database. And that's something we support. So you can model data objects, and then those data objects will be stored and retrieved and updated to a database table. But in addition, you can actually also use data objects on top of your external REST services. So let's say you have a lot of REST services already within your organization, and you want to exploit those in your process and case models, and you want to use the data structure for those external services, and provide a structured way to use that data within your process and case models, then data objects can also be used in Flowable. So instead of going to the database, it will invoke a REST call for you. And the same things can be done. So you can query on data objects, you can create a data object, update, delete. So all this stuff is available there as well. And it provides a really nicely structured way to work with data in Flowable. Then another great example is the send and receive task, which is using our event registry, as we call it. And that's really an abstraction on top of something we call channels. And you can think about Kafka, you can think about JMS, RabbitMQ, AWS, SQS, but also something like email. So a lot of different channels that we support. And that provides a really nice asynchronous interaction that you can use in your process and case models. So you can send out events to the event registry and then wait until the response comes in. And that's all done asynchronously. And the state of the process or case model is stored in between. So it provides a really easy way to work with JMS, to work with Kafka together with Flowable. And then the last thing is creating a document. That's something that everybody can relate to. You have a lot of context in a case, in a process, a lot of variables that you have available, and you want to use that context to generate a document. It can be a welcome letter and just anything else that you can think about. And then in those template models, you can use the variable context that you have within your process and case and send out a nice Office Word document with that data. So that's another thing that's possible with Flowable. And these are just 4 main examples of low-code features that we have in Flowable, but we have a lot more as well. So we really want to emphasize the low-code nature of Flowable and all the capabilities that we have with the different model types that we support. And then we are going a bit further with our low-code support with scripting. So what we always have been supporting is plugging in your Java logic. So for a service task or anything else where you want to use custom logic, you could always use Java with Flowable. But if you think about more kind of cloud deployments or deployments where it's not easy to change the class path because it's a platform that needs to keep running, it needs to be something hot deployable that you can use. For that, we are really extending our scripting support. So we always have been supporting scripting already as a script task where you can do a lot of stuff, but we are taking it now a step further. And that's with our Flowable scripting API, where you see some small examples here on this slide. So it has, for example, APIs to easily interact with JSON objects, with dates, with calculating stuff between dates, for example. So it's quite an extensive scripting API that can be used. And while doing this, so while adding these more scripting capabilities, it's of course important that you can also use it in a lot more different places. So not only in a script task, but also in a task listener, in an execution listener, for example, in a service registry model. So there's now the possibility that you invoke a bit of script from a service registry model. If you want to go a bit more technical, then it's also possible to use scripting on HTTP request and response handler level. And also think about our action models, where you can trigger some logic that where you can just interact with a little bit of logic when clicking a button. Those action bots can now also be implemented with scripting instead of only Java. And Yoram Barras will show a lot more details later today in his scripting for smart solutions session. So there we will go a lot more in detail about all the options and possibilities that we have there. Then if we move a bit further, so we have all the low-code capabilities, and with all the different model types, we have our extensive scripting support that we are adding and have added. But then there's still sometimes the need or the wish to use Java or use a REST API to integrate with Flowable. And that's one of the other important aspects of Flowable, that although we are a low-code platform, there's still all possibilities to work with our APIs. And that starts with the REST API level. So you can do integration or call a REST API endpoint for a specific UI application that you want to build. And that we have really a lot of endpoints that you can use for to get process information, get case information. A lot is available. And if we go a step further on a Java level, there it's really almost endless what can be done with Flowable. So we really don't want to limit anybody when working with Flowable. You can always call some Java API. You can override certain logic if that's needed. So it's really an open platform if needed. If you want to go beyond the low-code features, then that's possible. And of course, another important part of this pro-code open API aspect is that our main engines, the BPMN, CMMN, DMN engines, are available on GitHub. It doesn't get more pro-code than that. You can get all the code from our GitHub repository and play around with it. If you then look at how could you use this pro-code capability, and then it can be as simple as this small process that you can see here. So there are service tasks, there are maybe external worker tasks where you implement custom logic with Flowable. So for those, you can use our Java APIs, our REST APIs, and just implement the logic. But it also goes like the engines have engine configurations, and you can just plug in your custom logic. If you would really want to, you could even override how a user task works in BPMN, because that's something we open up. You can override that if you really want to. But if we take it a bit more on the kind of normal and more well-used level, then we have a lot of API interfaces that you can implement to add a bit of interception logic, for example, to an HTTP request, to an HTTP response, to an execution list or to a task list. And so there are a lot of possibilities to work with custom logic in Flowable. If we move now a step up, what are the usage patterns that we can see with Flowable? And that's more like which interactions are we supporting as Flowable? And this is just to show that we can do a lot of usage patterns that you might not have thought about before. And it starts with a knowledge worker, which I think is the kind of standard use case. You are a knowledge worker, and you can use our case management capabilities at the flexibility that we have there with manual interaction. You can choose as a knowledge worker that you want to start a specific process. And so that's a quite common way to use Flowable. You work with documents, case data. You call out to certain processes. You add AI, machine learning capabilities. That's the stuff we can do. If we go a bit more to the service orchestration level, then a very common pattern that we see today is that we push. So we call out to other external services from our processes. So the service registry task is a very good example of that, to call out to another REST service. But it could also be custom logic in a service task or script task to invoke some external logic. It's really calling out to something outside of Flowable. And Flowable then takes care of the orchestration to all these services and make sure that the state of the process is managed for you. And so that's quite a common pattern when you use Flowable. A pattern that's maybe not that well known, but also really well supported with Flowable is the pool service orchestration. For that, we added already a while back the external worker task capability. And the external worker task is more like, you can consider it like a queue. So we create data to that queue, and each external worker will add something to that queue. And each task can say, I want to add something to this specific queue. So you can choose a name for that. And that name is really important because that's the way you can then interact with the queue. That's based on the name. And then you can use external services to call out to the queue and say, I want to get the next item from this queue, and I will process that. And so you can see like a service A, service B in this example, where they are trying to fetch data from this queue in Flowable and then execute it. And the nice thing about that is that the service implementation can be horizontally scaled a lot. So you can have like 30 instances of service A, it doesn't matter. They will all pull for work in Flowable and execute it. And Flowable will make sure that only one of those service instances will be able to acquire this work. And so that we will take care of, and we use our locking and job mechanisms for that. But it's really another pattern to interact with Flowable. Instead of that Flowable pushes out, you are actually getting data or getting work from Flowable. And of course, Flowable then still takes care of all the state management that you always have. And the last usage pattern that I wanted to mention is the event-based communication. And that's using our event registry. So it's really an abstraction to send out an event, receive an event. And we actually also have a task to send out and receive an event to make it a bit easier to have these kind of async request response handling. So then you can easily interact with a Kafka queue topic. You can interact with a JMS queue. It's really an abstraction level, and it allows you to integrate other services in an easy way. And those other services don't need to know about Flowable. They just send out a JMS message, they receive a JMS message, or listen to a Kafka topic and respond to that. So it's really a nice interaction that you can use as well. So those are very different usage patterns that we all support in Flowable. And about this event registry, there's a talk from Philip at 3 o'clock, who will talk about event registry in a lot more detail and how you can scale and all of that. So that's a nice presentation to look at if you want to hear more information. And just to really summarize, CMMN, BPMN, DMN are very strategic for us. We have a lot of different model types to support the low-code capabilities, but on top of that, or below that, depends on how you see it, we also find it really important to support the pro-code options as well. So there is a clean REST API, there is a Java API, and we have our open source engines. So that's really the kind of foundation of Flowable that we use in every new feature that we are building. It needs to always be based on this layer, so to say. So now let's talk a little bit about a new design application that we are working on. So the background a bit, so for those who know the current design application, so that's the application where you can where you can model your processes, cases, and all the other model types that we support. But the problem with that application is a bit that it's written in AngularJS, which is the first Angular version that was out there, and that's end of life. There's no support for that anymore. It's using something that's called the Oryx framework, and we use that for the BPMN, CMMN editing. And that's actually a framework which is really old. I copied in an old screenshot from the Google Code repository where it was hosted. But there's nothing happening with that anymore. It's really outdated. And there's also the alignment issue. We have Flowable work, it's fully written in React, and we want to use that across all Flowable products. And Flowable design, besides the Flowable work application, is really a vital component for us because that's the foundation where you can do your low-code modeling. So that was mainly the reason to say we really need to start going with a new design application, and that also gives us the opportunity to improve a lot of the functionality and usability with the current design application. So just focusing a bit also on the technical aspects of this new design application. So we are using React Flow, which is basically replacing the Oryx framework in the current design. So React Flow is a React framework that provides a really nice drag and drop capabilities for your HTML and SVG elements. It's really a nice foundation to build a new editor upon. It has the basic implementations for the connection, so you can connect elements together, which is really important for our sequence flows and associations in CMMN, for example. So this is the framework that we are using for our new BPMN, CMMN, and the DMN service model editors. And we are really happy with that new framework and the choice we made there. Just from a look and feel perspective, so this is a screenshot of the work in progress that we are doing at the moment. The nice thing is that these elements are, so the BPMN elements are just plain HTML elements, and only the sequence flows are SVG, and that makes it a lot more performant, a lot better experience than a full-blown SVG diagram editor as we have today in the current design. That's really easy ways to resize and align elements. Sequence flows are automatically drawn with the right angle, so that it's really easy to model stuff. Things like sequence flows, boundary events, sentries need to always be attached. So you can't have the current problem of the current design where you can have non-connected elements. That's just not possible anymore with the new design. So a lot of nice things. You might have seen that I've left out the form editor when talking about the React Flow implementation. And that's because we are really stepping away from the current look and feel of our form editor. So we are going towards what you see is what you get form editor, where we really work with the actual form components. So not like rectangles where you don't see anymore what you are modeling with. It really shows what you will see in real life with the form. And we're also trying to make this really extensible for custom form components that you might need as well. And yeah, as you can see in this example, there's nice drag and drop capabilities where you can immediately see what happens when I drop this element here. But that's just one of the nice things that you get with this new form editor. And then there's also improved functionality. So we have always had a bit of a strange thing with two zip formats to export deployable formats and shareable packages. So we are now making the step that there's just one zip file. So there's no distinction anymore between deployable or shareable. It's just one zip file. You can import it, you can export it, and yeah, that just makes it a lot cleaner and clearer to work with. We will have a lot more improved options for permissioning capabilities within design, so that you can really say for this application, only this group can edit, and this group has only read-only rights. So a lot more capabilities to define that. And then the backwards compatibility, because a lot of our current customers, they have done a lot with our Flowable design application, of course, and we should really make sure that the upgrade process is smooth. So that's we are putting in a lot of effort to make sure that the stuff that you have today will nicely import into the new design application. And only on some palette customizations that you might have done, you might need some different attributes to do the same thing, but that we will clearly document in a migration guide. But everything else, the current model data and all of that will work out of the box. So the focus is that we will first do the BPMN, CMMN form and DMN editors. And when that's ready, we will do a public release in the cloud where you can just sign up and start modeling. So a really easy starting point. And then we will implement all the other editors, like the service registry models, action models, everything else. And then that will be the moment where we will replace the current design with this new design application. And then, of course, also update the cloud version with this full release. So that's a bit the outlook for 2023, where we are working towards. The final bit of the presentation, and then we will go into Q&A, is about our managed service solution. So a lot of our customers, and I think everybody will definitely recognize that, are moving more towards virtual deployments using Kubernetes, for example, or also using Docker. And that's something we really want to support well with Flowable as well. So as you know, or you might know, we already were doing a lot of Docker support from the early days. So that's already for years and years that we are creating Docker images with our open source and enterprise releases. And that's something we will keep doing. But then on top of that, we also added Helm charts for the Kubernetes deployments, also in open source and enterprise, and to make that easy. But lately we have taken the additional step to also come up with kind of templates to easily set up an environment, for example, for Flowable work, for Flowable design, for control on Azure, on Amazon, AWS. Really have templates available where you fill in your account information or something like that. And you can just take those templates and run them, and you have a fully working Flowable work environment. And for that, we also use Argo CD. So Argo CD is more for the deployments where you might do some new functionality to Flowable work, and you need to deploy a new application. For that, we use Argo CD together with, for example, GitLab pipelines to do that. And then on the monitoring and alerting part, so we use Prometheus to gather all the metrics from our application services. So from Flowable work, the environment running that, design, control, to have a good overview. But interestingly, for things like a database that's running on AWS or on Amazon, on Azure or on Amazon AWS, for those ones where you use the services of the cloud vendor, for those, it's not easy to do that only with Prometheus. So we also added Grafana to that, to also collect that information and use that to send out alerting information. So what we have done is we created a managed service solution where we manage the Flowable work, design and control environment for you and make sure that everything works smoothly. You get upgrades with new versions. You can choose between different setups, different configurations based on the amount of users that you need. You might need specific connectivity with your identity management solution. All of that is covered. And we are doing that in isolation. So there's no shared resources or something. Every customer has its own environment. So there's no possibility that data will go from one tenant to the other. It's fully isolated. So that's something that we have available as well. Just to finish up and really go into Q&A, two more things that I quickly want to mention. So we have something that we call Flowable Leap, which is a tool that helps you to do migration. So we added a validation capability where you can upload your BPMN model from another vendor. And then Flowable will do a validation if that BPMN model will nicely run on Flowable. And it gives you some guidance on things you might need to change or could change. So it's a nice help there. In addition to that, for specifically Camunda 7, there's also an automatic migration where we can take a Camunda database and just transform that into a Flowable database and just keep all the runtime and historic data. So there's no data loss or something like that. You can just continue running your instances then on Flowable. So that's also part of this solution. And then something finally I want to mention is the how-to videos that we have been adding lately. So on our YouTube channel, there are now over 40 videos that you can watch. And it's just providing a lot of detailed information. But it starts with an introduction, what is Flowable, how you can run it easily. But it also goes in full detail about how to use multi-instance, how to use variable aggregation, how to set up a custom front-end project. So it covers really a wide range of topics. And I want to highlight, if you are looking for information outside of our documentation page, then this is a really great resource. And with that, I would like to go into Q&A. I think Joram is now joining the session. Hi, Joram.
Hey, hello.
Hi.
We're doing the first session, in front of your computer to start with that. There's a lot of questions, so I'm trying to pick a set of them. So I first want a lot of questions on the new design, as to be expected. So first question is React Flow replace the Oryx modeler also in open source. So a lot of questions around open source and the relation to this new design.
Yeah, that's an interesting question indeed. So what the plans that we have there is that with this cloud environment that we will make available, where you can just register and use that environment, that's actually the direction where we want to go, that you have a modeling environment that you can just use, and you can do all the modeling there instead of needing to run some local editor yourself. We will make that available for you, and that will have all these new capabilities.
Yeah, thank you. So another question also around the new design that I noted down here is that where will the data be hosted? Geographically perhaps, or what's the plans there?
Yeah. So where we want to start is it's more like a playground environment where you can get familiar with the new design application. You can quickly model things, but there's not a strong SLA from our point of view, like it will be up for 99.99%. That's something we want to do a bit later. Where we want to really provide an environment where that there is strong SLAs, there are guarantees and all of that, and then also the location of that application data becomes an interesting point. So that will be something we have to decide a bit later, but I think we are also very open to hear about what our interested prospects and customers would like to see there.
Yeah, thanks. That being said, there's also two questions here around migration. So will there be a need for a migration from the old Flowable design to the new Flowable design?
Yeah, so I tried to address that a bit in the backwards compatibility slide. We really are putting in a lot of effort and a lot of QA effort that the models that you have today still work in the new design application. So it's really a matter of using the new application, pointing it to your existing database, and that's it. There's no migration steps needed. The only thing where we do require some changes is when you did some palette stencil customization, added your own tasks, own attributes. For those, we require some small changes, which we will clearly document.
Yeah, right. Another question, and this is then about Leap, is will Leap also be able to be used for models coming from Flowable open source to Flowable enterprise, backward compatibility wise and stuff like that?
That's a good point. So basically for models, and then I'm talking definitely about BPMN models that you have in open source, will run out of the box on our enterprise solution, so on Flowable work. Because we are using the open source BPMN engine inside Flowable work. So there's absolutely no reason why anything should not work in Flowable work. So that's why we also didn't add that to the Leap solution, because it just works.
Yeah. Very cool. So I just got a paper that I need to tell the audience that we will collect all of the questions that have been asked and we will answer them all online, because I can tell you there is more than 10 coming in right now. So it's actually quite busy for me to follow and listen at the same time. Maybe the last one that I just saw coming in, and then we will finish this session, is will there be an easier in and out mapping for service or database tasks in new design? And that's a topic that's dear to my heart, so that's why I picked it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. So I think data input and output in general is something that has our interest and focus. I think it's also is something we need for user tasks, for example. And so it's kind of a wider topic, and it also helps you to structure your data in a better way, right? And so I think it's definitely something we look into. But then more in the general context, then we really want to provide that input output possibilities in all the aspects, basically in all the different task types that we have.
Okay, thank you. I see that our tech team is waving that we need to stop the session. So again, we will answer all the questions, because I saw again many coming in on the other platform. So we will answer all of these online, and thank you, Tijs, for doing the first presentation of the tech stream, and there's obviously many more interesting to come.
Yeah, thanks a lot.